Hey, you sister students. Today we are talking about the 1920s. Continuing on into the 1920s, we're going to be talking about how the 1920s was a time of conflict between traditional values and new emerging values. And so today we're going to hit on some of those traditional values that they're trying to preserve in the 1920s. One of the biggest things that historians point to showing that the 1920s was a time of preserving traditional values is prohibition. So prohibition is a big deal during the 1920s. Basically, what it is it's getting rid of or banning the sale, the manufacture and use of alcohol. And so a lot of groups had spent a lot of time working up trying to get rid of alcohol in society because they thought that it was a cause of poverty, a cause of crime. It hurt family values, and so a lot of women spoke out against alcohol. And this whole movement is called temperance, the temperance movement, and trying to temperate, moderate, get rid of alcohol. Person you need to know right here, Frances Willard. She was one of the leaders in the Prohibition movement, the temperance movement, and she created the Women's Temperance Union. She also created the Prohibition Party, and eventually, in 1919, her and other reformers were able to persuade states to ratify what's known as the 18th Amendment, which banned the sale of alcoholic beverages. So the 18th Amendment is going to be our Prohibition Amendment. Prohibition did last to the 1920s, but it was not popular. Many Americans disliked it. They felt like it was wrong to force one part of the country's morals onto other parts of the country, onto other people. It put a lot of people out of work. All the distributors for alcohol, manufacturers, sellers of alcohol, many people were out of work, and it increased organized crime. That's one thing you need to remember is people didn't necessarily stop drinking, so it just rose or caused crime to rise as they found other ways, illegal ways to get alcohol. So drinks were still easily found at different places, underground drinking establishment. These were called speakeasies. So this is part of the organized crime where they would get their alcohol through different gangs. Very similar to how gangs today traffic drugs. Gangs in the 1920s trafficked alcohol. So in the early 1930s, Prohibition was repealed, and that's the 21st Amendment. So 18 is passage of Prohibition, 21 is repealing of Prohibition. And one thing that many historians point to and take away from this is that it shows that if it's an unpopular law, many times it's not going to be able to be enforced very effectively. Another way that many Americans tried to preserve traditional values was by placing restrictions on immigration. So the 1920s was a time where there's lots of nativist feelings. So that word again that we've seen before, nativism, the belief that you are the people that are from the home country are more superior than those coming in, the immigrants, and those from other countries. They are inferior, and so they do not want them coming into the country. Congress passed several laws, several acts, immigration acts, through the 1920s that kept immigrants from South and East Europe out. So many people were racist against people from South and East Europe. They believed they were inferior, and so there were several laws passed to keep them out. Quotas were placed on European countries, only allowing in a certain amount. So that's what this picture is showing right here. So obviously this is Uncle Sam, and this is this big funnel from Europe. It was all the people trying to come in, but he's only allowing in 3% to the country. So they only allow a certain percentage from each country coming in. So there was a widely held belief by many Anglo-Saxon Americans that that their race was superior to other races. And so this is one reason why we saw in the last slide that they wanted to restrict immigration to those inferior individuals, as they thought, from coming into the country. And so this belief that they're better, there's people that are more that are better and those that are worse, led to a belief in social Darwinism, so survival of the fittest, and that only the best would survive, and that led to the rise in what's called eugenics. And eugenics is the belief that you could improve the human race through breeding, and so selective breeding of humans not allowing those who are inferior to reproduce. And so the belief in eugenics would say you should not let the mentally ill have children, or immigrants from South and Eastern Europe should not be allowed in because they're inferior. We don't want them mixing into our population and bringing our population down. So that's the belief in eugenics, and that was on the rise in the 1920s. And they're trying to hold on to traditional values. They're trying to keep immigrants out. They're trying to protect their country the way that it has been up to this point. Next is what's called the Scopes monkey trial. This is 1925. This is one of the big battles between modernity and fundamentalists and traditionalism in the time period. So this is basically against Christian fundamentalism and evolution. And so the Christian fundamentalism belief is that there's a literal truth of the Bible. So they believe that every part of the Bible is exactly true, exactly as is written. And so they would not believe in the theory of evolution that Darwin proposed in the late 1800s. And so in Tennessee, the state of Tennessee, they passed laws against teaching Darwin's theory of evolution. This law was called the Butler Act, and basically it said that you could not teach it in Tennessee in any public school that was getting government-funded money. Well, there's a group called the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, and they wanted to reverse this law in Tennessee. And so they were willing to support and defend any teacher willing to stand up to the law, be arrested for it, and take it to court. So this guy right here, his name is John Scopes. He was a biology teacher, and he was willing to teach evolution, have himself arrested, and go on trial. And so that happened. The ACLU paid a famous defense lawyer named Clarence Darrow to defend him, and the prosecutor was our friend William Jennings Bryan, who we've seen before. He's run for election 3 times and lost, but he was a famous prosecutor brought in special by the state of Tennessee to prosecute John Scopes. And this is a big deal. This is a big trial. These were 2 of the best lawyers in the country at the time, and this court case was broadcast on radio. People were listening all around the country, grabbed public attention, and in the end, John Scopes was convicted of teaching evolution. He was found guilty. He was fined $100, which equals out to be about $13.31 in today's dollars, but it was later dropped on a technicality. But the big thing that you need to take away from this is that just that fight in the 1920s between traditionalism and new values emerging.